Hello, everyone. This is Rachel Yellen with the Yes to Birth Experience. Welcome. I am so happy today to have Bianca Sprague, who is the co-founder and CEO of Bebo Mia, along with her business partner, Natasha Marchand. And also today we have Alana Nugent, who is the marketing director of Bebo Mia as well. Hello, you guys. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You are so welcome. So what I want to do is, because you both have such a rich, juicy bio, I actually just want to fill in our listeners a little bit more about you. So Bianca, the co-founder, like I said, with Natasha Marchand and CEO of Bebo Mia, she is a badass queer entrepreneur and mom to Graydon. She lives in Toronto and co-parents with her partner, who's here today, Alana. Bianca feels especially passionate about creating access to quality pre- and postnatal care for marginalized communities. She's an advocate for mental wellness for the entire family, and especially for the birthing parent after suffering from postpartum depression in silence and losing her father to suicide in 2012. She recognizes the barriers put in place for female entrepreneurs and believes that understanding the evolving online space can even the playing field for women in business. Bianca, amazing. Welcome. And I just want you to say hi and just wave so everyone knows who you are.
Hi, I'm Bianca.
Like you have to say something. Okay, good. And Alana is the marketing director of Bebo Mia. She co-parents her 11-year-old daughter, Gray, with her spouse. That, of course, is Bianca. And Alana has a degree in physical education and health and a postgrad in marketing. She feels like she has found her calling now, that she is able to combine all that she knows about human development, the mind-body connection, critical race theory, scientific constructions of sex and gender, social theory, and the body and marketing. Alana was an elite level athlete and loves spending as much time as she can planning new adventures for her family and drinking excessive amounts of coffee and kombucha, good combination. And Alana's latest passion project is advocating for a shift in how marketers and influencers talk about alcohol and motherhood. Wow. Super, super powerful. So what I would love, since we've gotten a little bit of taste of you individually, is can we just jump right in and have you share what is Bebo Mia, what's the mission, philosophy, and what does Bebo Mia offer?
Yeah, for sure. So Bebo Mia, we actually started as a full service clinic here in Toronto, Canada, and we offered services for fertility, birth, and the postpartum period for parents. And then we shifted after we found that a lot of the trainings fell very short that were available for people working in those fields. So we shifted our model to train practitioners in an inclusive, well-rounded education that we felt like people weren't getting, especially with a social justice lens, because that was the piece that we found that people weren't talking about anything outside of this normal, which is non-existent essentially. So now we teach in the online space. We teach live, like similar to how we are talking right now. And we offer our main course is our doula training, which is we call our maternal support practitioner training. And it's a 16-week program that covers all of the fertility into the first year postpartum. And then we go into any of the services that would support families through that as well. So we have a preconception program for practitioners. We have breastfeeding, we have sleep, we cover childbirth education. So all of this, though, is through a mindfulness and social justice lens. All of this work, I appreciate that we jumped around in our business model, but all of it connects back to our mission, which is connecting women to their intrinsic value and power, which is something that's so critical for us. And we would love to, if anyone wants to check out our definition of how we define women, you can find that on our website, because it is something that is a really inclusive word that we're using. So anytime we're talking about maternal or women, both of those have been defined by what that means to us. And you can see both those definitions on our site.
I would actually love for you to share that, because, there's so many people that are, listening here that really don't understand, or this is a new concept for them. And so you're teaching a lot of, nurses and midwives and doulas and hopefully doctors. And so I'd love for you to actually share that.
Yeah, of course. So our definition of women, I'm going to read it because it's a little bit wordy. um, so it says, we use the term women in our mission and throughout some of our values work. We define women as women identified, femme presenting, two-spirited, genderqueer, trans-inclusive, gender nonconforming, androgynous, agender, intersex, bigender, gender questioning, gender fluid, butch, non-binary, queer positive, or any person that would like to be included in this definition.
Awesome. So great. It makes me feel good, actually, like really makes me feel good. So thank you for creating such a clear statement about that. And how long has Bebo Mia been up and running?
Yeah, so we opened our first space 11 years ago, and then we started closing our centers. We also have a company called Bebo Mia Fitness, and it's the first pre and postnatal fitness company in Canada. We bought it. It's 37 years old, or no, 31 years old. So we acquired it in 2013. So we started closing those centers, and we moved exclusively online 4 years ago.
That's incredible. So everything that you provide now is online, much of which is live.
Yeah. The live piece is really important to us because, I mean, there's lots of really great online programming and you buy the videos and you just watch them. But we have this community piece, which, I mean, most of what we're going to talk about today is about that community. It's so essential for practitioners as well as families. And so it's live, and then they have a space where everyone gets to know each other. And that was something we were really worried about when we moved from the brick and mortar into the digital space, because community is so critical and it's a pillar of our values work that we do. So we find, though, that we developed these like incredible intimate relationships in the digital space, which really surprised us, and it opened it up to people outside. Well, first they were outside of the Greater Toronto area, and then it started rippling out, and we created that accessibility for people living with visible and invisible disabilities, that we're now able to access this education, people that live rural, people that can't afford to just drop their children and leave for 3 to 4 days to do a training somewhere else, especially if they have to travel, because not all doula trainings are offered in all regions. So now we have literally people from all around the world, and it's so cool to be in an online live space with somebody from the Philippines and somebody from New Zealand and from Ireland and from across North America. And that digital space allows us to do that.
And I think that's part of what lends to right to the story about what makes us unique is that we didn't want to undermine that hands-on experience. I mean, it's birth and it's birth work that is like at its core is connection. So we really took that into consideration when wanting to reach a global market, recognizing what it's like to be online, and also sort of the preconceived notions of what online learning might look like. And we've completely elevated it. And like, Bianca said, with our Facebook group and with the ways in which we connect and interact with the community. And then from that also inspires connection within their own communities, because then they'll find other students or just create something of their own, so that they're drawing upon like the things that they're learning with us and then taking them and being able to use them in a practical sense.
It's so impressive. What's so impressive is that you started it already in, it sounds like 2014. In 2014, that you went in that direction, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad, because there isn't a lot offered, and to just reach people around the world is incredible. So thank you for doing that. So, in talking about I just want to point people to Bebo Mia, the website. So can you tell us, just say what the website is and what are people going to find there, in addition to some of the things that you've already mentioned in terms of offerings?
Yeah, so our website is www.bebomia.com. We appreciate it's an interesting name, so it's BEBOMIA.com. And on the site, the blog has really, really cool stuff that happens. So with both what our team can put out, and as well as featuring the incredible talent in our community. Like, I'm blown away on a daily basis just listening to the gifts and the lived experience that's among our graduates and our current students. As well as you'll be able to see a little bit about our courses, any offerings that we have coming up, any free programs that we do. So we have a couple Facebook groups that are really active, and all of those you can find from the homepage. But our social media also, our Facebook, we're on live all the time, interviewing people, featuring businesses from around the world. Our whole thing is about just sharing everybody's gifts and being that hub for practitioners, as well as offering really great information for parents. So we have that lens that people can come on and be like, oh, that's really great feedback about, you know, how our brain develops. And as well as practitioners, they can take that information and take it out to their clients as well.
Awesome. So what I wanted to ask you, you know, of course, the theme of our show is how to have a healthier, less painful, empowering, satisfying birth. And if, you know, from the Bebo Mia lens and what you teach to pregnant and birthing parents, and also to providers, whether it's childbirth educators or any other providers, what are like the top five things that you recommend for people to have the best possible birth experience, whether you're the one giving birth, that you're the one who is present as the partner, or you are the professional?
Yeah, we have one that's really important, and we found a cute name for it, but it's building your birthing bubble. That actually can be divided into three really important ones, and that's your birth environment. So just like making a very informed decision around where you're actually choosing to give birth. That's your care provider, which is something that so many people are like, oh, I just got this one and that's what I'm stuck with. But getting really clear on what you want in your care provider. Building your care team. So that's might be a doula, it might be a partner if you have one, it might be your sister. For practitioners, it would be supporting their clients through this process. One, understanding your brain, which is so critical, and it's an acronym that we have so that you can make really great informed decisions. And then having a birth advocate with you. And I mean, this is the work I do. I am an advocate and an educator, and I recently went through, I had a hysterectomy, and I found even this is my like zone of genius. This is the area where I feel comfortable and have really high competency and understand like all the things about it. And as a patient though, I found I needed Alana there to be like, no, you mentioned a risk there. Like, can you actually elaborate? Could you say the stats on that? Because I found it was really hard for me as the patient to be able to do that work. So making sure that you have an advocate that doesn't necessarily know all the things, but can like slow down the pace. I just happen to have an advocate that also knew about all of these elements. So as the fifth one, we think that that's a really important aspect, because it can be very charged to be in that space when you're trying to gather information and sort your thoughts out. And unfortunately, our medical field has a really like, here's the information, we need a decision. Like, here's what I'm throwing at you, like, decide right now, or like, we're moving ahead with this. So somebody to really set that pace.
And I think also like it's really easy for us to understand when it's in like the birther context. It's easy to help that person understand, yes, you have all that information and you still need a person beside you helping you to like uphold those values, uphold your plan, because when you're in that moment, you might not be able to make that objective decision. The same actually goes, in my opinion, for practitioners. Do you have a circle of other practitioners who are aware of your values and what you bring into the space when you're working with clients? And do you have a safe person to talk to so that you can check in and also be guided by another person, another mentor? So just to remember that goes both ways. It's really easy for us to identify the responsibility within the birther and their advocate, but also from the practitioner standpoint, I think that it's important that you have a safe person to talk some of your cases out with.
Is the piece about love and where love plays a role in this whole birthing experience. So if you guys can start to speak to that, I would love
that. Of course, we'd happily talk about love.
Well, I mean, so when we're talking about, you know, the practitioners and the experience of birthers' bodies in a space, I think this can kind of tie nicely into the way in which we are moving along the path towards body autonomy as a culture, as a race, like the human race I'm referring to. And you know, you talked about the intrinsic power that comes from being in that space when you get to shut down the frontal cortex and like just, you know, go into that deep intrinsic power that you have. That's not dissimilar to the love that I think we're referring to, or not I think, I know that we're referring to when it comes to changing birthing outcomes and changing the landscape of birth. It's connecting to this internal deep self-love that is going to help move us forward. And, you know, I think you can take it away on that one.
Well, and I mean, the love piece, I mean, our love hormone is oxytocin, and some people might be like, yeah, I'm super familiar with that. But it is, I mean, it's an important part of conception. It's a critical part of labor and birth. Like, it's so critical. And we are birthing in a space that does not support our bodies flooding with oxytocin. And if we take that, like, zoom out a little bit from that birther in that space and go out to society at large, I mean, birth is scary. It's presented as, like, you know, bad, and scary things happen, and you're going to need interventions. And, you know, look at any television show. As soon as someone's pregnant in it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be some terrible subplot of, like, just scary, and, like, rushing, and we're going to maybe lose the birther and maybe the baby. And that's the messaging that we get all the time. And now we're telling people, like, go into a place that's typically a little bit scary if they're choosing to birth in a hospital, which the majority of birthers do. So go into a space that's a little bit scary, that might have previous trauma or grief if you, like, watched a parent die, or you watched a grandparent die, or you were sick as a child. Like, go in there and flood your body with love hormones and make sure that, like, you just let your body do its thing. So we're getting this really conflicting messaging that, like, birth is normal and your body is just a biological process, but it hinges on this oxytocin experience that we are definitely not going to get when, you know, society's presenting it as really terrible, and the environment is not conducive to, like, bright lights, lots of people in the room. Like, we should be birthing in a similar environment that we have sex in. So, you know, typically most people don't like bright lights and a whole bunch of people in there, and, like, really cold and, like, semi-sterile, like, you know, all these conditions. And so, you know, tying it back to what we really want to talk about today is bringing that self-love, which it should be really obvious, but it's actually these kind of radical statements, both as practitioners and as birthing people, or people intending to give births, for those of you in your preconception.
And I think, like, the other piece is, you know, goes going back to the system and the messaging that we're getting with respect to things not working, and that is one of our, like, central themes of things that we do, and in terms of the messaging that we communicate to our students, to our community, to our friends, to our family, is our bodies aren't broken, and birth isn't broken, and it's the system that is. And yet we keep taking on the responsibilities to, like, tweak here and tweak there, just so that it makes it feel okay for us. And, you know, we go as far as to just endure crap that we don't want, just to make it, like, okay for us, because we're just so desperate to connect to that powerful experience that birth is. Because we know, our bodies know in our, like, cells, that this is an important, powerful experience, and we're clamoring to make it something that just feels okay. And that's problematic. And so what we want to also encourage with respect to self-love is, when you practice those things, and we're going to go into what that looks like, when you practice that self-love, that is the beginning of your movement towards radical feminism, and even just towards radical humanism, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really love about Bebo Mia is you're very evidence-based and have a lot of information about, you know, statistics, and you're functioning from that place. Can you help our viewers understand better how birth is broken? Now, I know how birth is broken, but it's one of those things where some people might, you know, care providers might bristle when they hear that, or might feel offended.
For sure.
And if you could speak to that, and then I want to come back to some other things that you're talking about.
For sure.
So I made some notes. So I'm going to pull out my iPad just so I make sure that I hit my points. One of the interesting points in birth history over the last 300 years, 400 years.
Which isn't that long as far as birth and history,
no,
right?
Not at all.
Let's just, yeah.
In modern history. It was an interesting point. So in 1920, Dr. DeLee, he was an American doctor, he argued that we need to make sure that we uphold the pathologic dignity of pregnancy if obstetrics is ever going to be regarded as a medical specialty. So what he was saying in that is that we need to make sure we continue to medicalize birth in order to have it recognized as a medical specialty. So he advocated very firmly for routine use of analgesics, episiotomy, and assisted delivery, which at that time was only forceps. So, I mean, right there, we had a male that decided, like, for this to be a medical specialty and for all of us doctors who are male to be taken seriously, we need to be controlling this process as much as possible and like really make sure that it's an obvious, need to take up hospital space and need to be focused in medical schools and all of these things. So from that moment, as we made that shift over that period and the previous 50 to 100 years, where we stopped seeing midwives as the primary care providers in the childbirth space, and we started seeing birth move into the hospital, that intervention, that cascade of interventions became very normal. And what that looks like, so for most people going into birth right now in North America, they go into triage. They're typically minimized because they've been at home laboring, and to them, they're like, I've been doing this for 5 hours already. That's a really long time. And so they go in, they're told to get into bed, they're told to take off their clothes, they're now in a gown, which is a very medicalized experience that you're no longer in any part of the environment that feels familiar and comfortable to you. And then they might check your cervix. And the reality is 5 hours of the first bit of sensations for the average birther, there's probably not a lot of cervical change in that time. I mean, it's great, their body's working really hard, but there's a lot of things that need to be happening. It takes a bit for our bodies to get into that flow. But to them, they've been working really hard, and they need that validated that like, you're great, you're on the right track. And instead they're told, you're only 1 centimeter, we're going to have to start this and this. They might send them home, which is actually a really great thing. Whenever my clients like, they just sent me home, I'm like, great, I'll meet you at home. That's an environment that most people feel safe in, but and not for everybody. So sometimes the hospital actually feels like a safer place for some people. So, but for those that are kept in the hospital, they're told to either walk for 4 to 6 hours. So now they're tired, they're under fluorescent lights, they're in air conditioning, they're in a space that's not comfortable. And then that just starts. Their water gets broken, oxytocin gets started, an epidural gets used. We'll see whatever happens with the labor that might lead to an operative birth or C-section, or it might lead to a vaginal operative birth with forceps or assisted delivery with vacuum. Like, these are all this like intervention. And right now in the US, for example, the failure to progress, so we call it labor dystocia, and that's essentially like somebody gets stalled too long at a certain centimeter point. Half of people getting C-sections as first-time birthers are going in because they failed to progress. So this is the messaging, like, your body failed at giving birth, when really 3 to 6% of people could actually get a diagnosis of failure to progress. But instead, I mean, we're looking at half of people with C-sections that were not scheduled with emergency C-sections. So like, we're sending this message that your body's broken and birth is scary. And finally this year, the World Health Organization stepped up and said, like, we really need to look at birth from the psycho-emotional, the psychosocial, the biological, the psychological, and they created a statement, which I encourage any practitioner to please go over to the World Health Organization. And even if you just read the executive summary, it will give you so much information that they're the things that are saying, which feels so obvious to any of us that have been in the broken birth space for a prolonged period. But they acknowledge, like, we need safe people for birthers. They need to be able to eat and drink. They need to be able to move. They need to be able to create the environment that they want. The interventions that we use are not recommended. We need to change when labor is considered active labor, which is the 6 centimeter mark, which is it's a huge step, and we probably won't see it in practice for another 10 years in the hospitals. But they're saying, like, you cannot say failure to progress before 6 centimeters. They're still in early labor, which should bring that stat way down for operative births once the hospitals take that messaging and those regulations and guidelines on.
It's a tough, like, and I can see in some ways how we got here, and unfortunately, you know, it's become a numbers game and resource game, and we're wanting to say yeah, like, have your baby and it's amazing and all of this, and yet we're wanting to speed it up, and it's like, you're not doing this in enough time, you're not, like, we need to get this going, get this room clean, move it up, move on to the next person. So with respect to, like, the system and it being broken, it's mainly because, well, not mainly, there's lots of reasons, but as we, you know, start moving along this idea of body autonomy, and we're all standing up and saying, hey, no, this isn't working for us. This is not the way in which we are going to be able to continue to move forward in this positive way, which we're all working so hard for. Let's look and do something different. And that something different needs to come from a place that's not consistently, I mean, predominantly women, doing all that emotional heavy lifting. We need to be able to have the autonomy to speak up and have someone else take care of the problem, because it's not our responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it just, there's such, oh, sorry, Rachel.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the disparity of, I mean, we say it's patient or client-centered care in obstetrics, and it couldn't be further. And some interesting, like, examples of this is recently they did research about the temperature of the OR for people undergoing operative births or cesarean sections. And they found that if they raised the temperature by 6 degrees, that we would see a dramatic decrease in maternal and infant mortality, morbidity related to hypothermia. And so, I mean, of course, like, that, it should be the outcome goal, is better outcomes for birthers and their babies. And instead, practitioners said it made it too uncomfortable to do their births. It's in Celsius, so I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, but it's like a nominal difference to go from, like, super cold to, like, coolish. That they said it felt uncomfortable working in those conditions. And so our ORs are kept at the temperature that we have the evidence to show it decreases the positive outcomes for birthers and their babies. For a whole, if you go down the list of all the things it impacts to have that hypothermic, like, room with everybody naked and wet except for the practitioners. And so I look at this research and I'm like, you can't have these posters all over that you care about birthers and their babies when you won't do anything that's uncomfortable for you in order to improve the outcomes. Like, even the lithotomy position, and that's that position where you're on your back with your legs either held up by people or held up in stirrups. And that practice was put in place for surgical, like, anything to do with like our pelvic floor or rectal surgery or vaginal surgery. But we kept that position for birthing. So if you look at anything where they're like, hold your legs up and bear down, and doing that Valsalva maneuver, so that hold your breath and push down for, 20 seconds. They say 10, but they're like 1 and push, 2, push. I'm like, oh, come on, we're almost at 30 seconds of this poor person holding their breath when we know our muscles need oxygen. We know our babies need oxygen. We know the birthers need oxygen. It's like a critical thing that we're all in agreement with. But we have people in these conditions that are super convenient for practitioners and not at all convenient or like better outcomes. That doesn't protect our pelvic floor. It leads to more fetal distress because they're now having their oxygen supply cut off for 30 seconds at a time. Like, all these things that I just watch it as a witness, and I'm like, you have to say no. Like, please, somebody say no. Because for practitioners, if I can say anything and you have one takeaway today, like, if you feel like you want to champion a shift in your community, in the birthing space is not the time to do it. So write letters, start a protest, but do not use somebody else's birth as a platform to create shifts in our medical system or try to mend that gap in the broken system. You're there to, like, do your best to protect your clients in that space, and it's not a time to, like, get on your soapbox and, like, try to change any of these things. That's why it's important for you to have somebody to process with, so you can call after and you say, I witnessed this and I witnessed this, and like I want that to change in my hospital, and then like, run with it. But please don't start that in somebody's birth experience. But the system of, and I mean, that's just the physical obvious things. Like, we haven't even touched on the psycho-emotional, where people are, not seeing like the disparity for people of color birthing, especially in the US. Like, in some states, it's as much as 20 times more likely to die in childbirth than their white contemporaries. So
we've had students communicate their birthing story as though they were preparing for war in Baltimore.
Knowing they might not come home from birth.
And that's how they described their birthing experience, that her and her husband were preparing for war.
Yeah.
You guys are pointing to so many important pieces, and I really want to pull. It's so interesting. I want to comment about this piece about not, like, I'm putting it in simplified words, not making a stink during, as like a doula, for example, not making a stink during a birthing experience. And it's interesting listening to different experts talk about this, because there's a variety of opinions about that. And so what I want to see if I can clarify is that birth workers don't stand on the soapbox and create a whole scene that would make the birth more difficult for the birthing person, and simultaneously that it is okay for the doula or for the spouse or whoever is there to say out loud, could you hold on for a second? I'm feeling really uncomfortable about this, and I'd like to check in with my client about that. Right? There's like a way to speak to care providers if you see that something is happening that is abusive or completely unnecessary or diminishing or taking the birther's power away, that there is a way to say, oh, we just need to hold on a second. Let me just check in with my client about this, to draw attention, where then the birthing person can speak on her own behalf and say what they're okay with and what's not. Go. Someone wants this one.
I know Alana and I are like, me.
Yeah.
I'll let Alana take over, but I think as it's a really important thing. Thank you for distinguishing that. And when we see human rights violations happening in the space, so when I've seen somebody say like, please don't touch my pelvic floor or my perineum or give me an episiotomy, and when the practitioner like blatantly ignores or doesn't get consent, like I would use my voice in those situations, which may lead to you being removed from the hospital. But to me, I'm like, the same way I would if I saw anybody being held down and have something done to their genitals that they were saying no to, I would step in. So when I see somebody pick up the scissors when they haven't asked my client if they want an episiotomy, I would say like, oh, so they have the scissors that are used for an episiotomy, typically the spouse if they have one, or their other birth partner. And that would be their cue to jump in, because at that time, typically the birther is pushing. And so they're in their own place. So in those cases, I definitely set the pace on what's happening in the room. But I mean, if I saw something happen, I wouldn't pull up my stats. I would make sure my clients went into that space with all that information prenatally, which is why it's so important to make sure you're doing comprehensive prenatal care, because the birth space is not when you start talking about the pros and cons of an epidural or the pros and cons of rupture of membranes or breaking the water. So that they have that information. They're armed with the right questions to use their brains. So understanding the benefits, the risks, what are the alternatives, what's their intuition saying, and what happens when we do nothing. So I will say, like, do you want to use your brain now? And then they will be able to say, like, can we just have 1 minute to ask questions about this? Because there's always time in birth. And when there isn't, we have a signal that I have with my clients that I'm like, there's no time for this. Like, we're going to go along and I'm going to talk at you as we go so that you feel like you're up to speed. Because those situations arise, they're not very common. But there's times when I'm like, you need to be quiet, you need to make eye contact with me, and I'm going to walk you through this because we don't have time to use our brain right now. But 99.5% of the time, there's time to use your brain and make sure
and what for our listeners, what Bianca, of course, is referring to the acronym BRAIN, right? Use your brain, the benefits, the risks, the alternatives, your intuition, and what if we do nothing? And I'll just also have to really point out, you guys are doing such an amazing job of helping our listeners understand why having an experienced birth professional that is that you hire that works for you, not coming from the hospital, is so valuable. And I hope that all of the listeners are getting the significance of what private birth workers actually do. So you guys are doing amazing with that. I just wanted to really appreciate you about that.
We don't know why anyone would give birth without a doula. I appreciate that for some people they're like, that's a luxury. And I loved how many of our students go in saying like income and race and all of these things, and like your family makeup, they shouldn't be an indicator of if you have a doula or not. And there's lots of really great social programs. I mean, we do free care for people in need. There's lots of doulas who are trying to get their training. If anybody's like, I can't afford a doula, or if you're like, I don't know any other Black women who have had doulas, we have our grads that are working so hard to change that message, because especially with our system being so broken, you do need that protection. And your spouse might be awesome if you have one, because we hear that a lot. That's usually the first thing, is like, oh, I have a husband, he's really great, he's really excited. And I'm like, a doula is there for both of you, because every birth is different. Even if you've already had a baby or 2 or 3 or 4, this situation is going to be different, and your space needs to be protected from, just unfortunately the system that we have right now.
And you can't predict how either of you are going to respond in those situations. So having, again, I see it really is, I mean, like, it's a guide, and it's a protector, and it's a person that's going to be, I'd call it a birth therapist, because it's like a person that's going to hold the space for both of you, or any of the other people that you want to involve in that birth experience. This is a person that knows how to hold that space and has come in completely like aware of all the things that are important to you, because it's so easy in moments of like, take birth out of it, in moments where we're like, lots of emotions are going and everything, it's hard to make decisions, like, add this incredibly like emotional experience, powerful experience. You're going to need someone that can just hold that space for you. And also I wanted to talk a little bit about like the experience piece too, because I know that even our students that come out sometimes feel that fear around supporting. So for anyone that is looking for a doula, I mean, the important thing is to know that these individuals know what's important and how to hold that in a space where you are going to birth. It doesn't necessarily mean they've had X number of births that they've attended, as long as they are someone that is capable of presenting you with all the information from a place that is judgment free, and is able to uphold the values. And usually you'll find that with someone that you connect emotionally to as well.
Yeah, you need to connect to that person. So even if you're like, oh, but they're only $300 and the other person was $6 and I really like them, I was like, figure it out. Like, don't go to Starbucks, or like, don't get I don't even know, like, don't get a stroller, get a carrier instead. Like, do what you need to do to get somebody that you feel really safe with, because they need to keep you safe. And like, I can't say enough how disappointing the birthing spaces are with just all the facets.
And on the note of like income and cost, it's important also, like, everyone does deserve this. Like, everyone. It's not an entitlement. It's not like a privilege. Like, everybody deserves this. And if you are in a place of privilege and you can afford to spend the money, I highly recommend you do. And if you are in a place where you're like, I absolutely cannot afford it, please know there are places for you to access resources and good quality care. So on both ends of the spectrum, it's there, and you give as much as you can to ensure that you feel like you've exchanged that energy in a way that feels right and just for you.
And honors the living wage of doulas. That's the flip side. It's a really like fine edge, because it is a right for every person, and the people that are doing the incredible physical and emotional labor to support you through your birth. And for any of you practitioners, like, please make sure you're honoring that gift as well, and honoring your worth in all of that, because it's really, as somebody, I mean, I've supported almost 200 people through their births, and it's really hard, and there's trauma as practitioners, and there's a lot of it. So make sure that both practitioners and parents, that you're honoring both sides of this.
I actually wanted to add one more thing around the honor part, because it also, we do recognize our responsibility in this space. And one of the things that our dear friend Brené Brown has taught us is about what she titles like minding and mending the gap. And that's important to us. So with respect to doulas and the care and care providers in the medical system, like it's important to us to mind and mend that gap. And we do that by, when there is a great experience, we write a card and send like a little thank you of like, thank you so much. Thank you for upholding this. You're doing great work. Keep doing what you're doing. So it's also important that we honor the people in the medical space that are doing an amazing job, because there are many of them.
Look into the eyes of anybody here who's, healing from birth or preparing for birth or wanting to get pregnant or facilitates, and you could look into the eyes and your message is what their takeaway is. What's that? So Bianca, if you can go first, that'd be great.
I'd have so many things to say to my 26-year-old self before I went into the birth space. I actually went in feeling really powerful, in the sense I wasn't scared of birth. I was like, my body knows exactly what it's going to do. Interestingly, my sister had just had a C-section a couple months before me, and I still was like, yeah, okay, that was your birth experience. It's definitely not going to be mine. Like, I didn't even explore those plans. But I did not have a community. I had to work really hard to do all the things that I do now for my clients, but I did it for myself. And it was really hard to do when we're talking about keeping that frontal lobe shut down. But I was fielding those questions. I was still explaining that I'm not going to be vaccinated. Like, in my labor, they were like arguing, like, you're not vaccinated. I was like, I know I'm not vaccinated, and I'm not talking about this right now while I'm in transition. Like, please get out of my room. Like, this is not the time to do any education with me. So that, through the birth experience, I worked really hard, which was really tiring, and it impacted how I got to connect with our daughter, Gray. And then I found the postpartum time so terrible. My postpartum depression was crippling. It like sucked the joy out of that time for me. So I would definitely make sure I built a really strong community, which I didn't have because I was living in a city that was 4,000 miles from my family. So I'm not from Toronto. And so I found that community piece was so important, and a community that stands behind what you want is really important. So not just like bodies in the seats, but bodies in the seats that are going to fight for your causes, that are going to fight for to support you in your advocacy work, that are going to really understand the things that are important to you, whatever those choices are. Like, breastfeed or don't breastfeed, co-sleep or don't co-sleep, wear your baby or don't wear your baby, it doesn't matter. But the people around you need to really, with every cell in their body, get behind the things that are important to you to make sure that you feel joy in parenthood. And that's the piece that I found, I lost the joy piece, and I feel really sad about that.
Cool. You are so powerful beyond measure. And when things come up, when you are trying to communicate your power, try, if you dig deep and recognize this is just another way in which you are being tested. And when you move through that test, you will get a little bit closer to really feeling what that power feels like. And that's why I think it is so important that we recognize that we are the architects of our environment. And that's from a spiritual, physical, relationship.
You made a new word.
I was too smooth. That's why. So you are the architect of your environment, and that's for all of the things. It's what happens inside your head, what happens inside your body, as well as what happens within your physical space. And when you connect to that power, you'll get everything you want.
I'm I'm a little verklempt. I'm just, I have a little tear here, and because I really am taking that in. And what you're speaking to, of course, Alana, is for all of us, those that are pregnant, not pregnant, about, being in connection with ourselves and our own sense of personal power. And for all the yes to birthers here, I really want you to take this, to really take this to heart, because, it's not just childbirth education. It's not just, birthing techniques. It's not just, getting the statistics, and, it's how is all of these, I'm walking away today with, okay, Rachel, you're gonna build myself my birth bubble, and I have to who's my advocate, right? Just because I'm in my, I'm 45 years old, doesn't mean that I don't need an advocate just because I'm a grown woman with resources and intellectual information. And that piece, the community piece, and this is a theme that many of our experts are discussing, is the importance of the community, because there are, wherever you think that you are, that there's nobody, there is. there is somebody who is aligned with you. There is somebody who cares about the same things that you care about. There is somebody that you can confide in and that you can trust. And they are there. You just may need to quietly, you know, search for them, but they are there. And you know, you may find yourself, one of the greatest resources, you know, for people is, you know, get to that prenatal yoga class, or get to that preconception parenting group, and you may find that, you know, that you can get connected with more like-minded people there.
And even like sometimes I also know for some people those kinds of spaces are super intimidating or off-putting. So go to a crochet or a stitching class or a succulent planting. Don't go with us, so we'll kill it. But a succulent planting workshop or something. If it's something that you're interested in, chances are you're going to find someone that is like-minded there and potentially going through something that you're going through. You know, they might not want to be in that pregnancy or parenting space for reasons.
So now we're doing dating coaching, because that's exactly right what the dating coaches and the love coaches say. It's like, if you hate baseball, like, don't go to a baseball game looking for your future spouse. You know, do the things that you like to do. And that is so great. I'm so glad you said that, Alana. It's awesome. Is there anything else that either of you would like to say to our yes to birthers before and it's hard to say goodbye. I'm feeling a little attached here. But anything else that either of you would like to say before we say goodbye?
For those practitioners, like, you're doing amazing work, and you know, we need more voices joining together to make these shifts. And I think our system's very broken right now, but it's not fixable. So together that we can make those changes. So find your community, make sure everything you're doing is filled with love and connectiveness, and you know, let's take out the competition. Let's take out that feeling of, I don't know, that we just challenge one another. So whatever people's beliefs are, we can still join together and make a difference. And for those people in their preconception, or you might be pregnant, you know, it's amazing what you're doing, and make sure again that you find that community that's so, it makes the world of difference. And don't forget about the digital space. I know that for some of you that might be challenging to get out, whether you're building a succulent or joining a prenatal yoga. So there's really, really amazing resources and so much community that you can find online if that feels better for you, based on, you know, visible and invisible disabilities or where you live. And you can find those people that can be your advocates and your cheerleaders and provide that education and support for you.
And we have one thing that we did forget to mention with our offerings on our website, and that is a gift for all of you if you are interested in tapping into what we were talking about with respect to self-love and power. We've created what's an online mini retreat, and you can access that, and we walk you through different lectures. They're short. They're interesting and fascinating talks. We're on them, as well as some of our team, and there's a workbook to follow along. It takes about half an hour a day for, like, split up around 2 weeks, and it is awesome. And so it's www.bebomia.com/Bliss Retreat. And this is a retreat that you can apply to any area of your life to connect to your intrinsic power.
I love it. I love it. So for all our yes to birthers, go to www.bebo, BEBOMIA, and check out the Bliss Retreat and all the other incredible offerings. Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Alana. And please extend my thanks to Natasha also for starting Bebo Mia. And you guys are doing incredible work. We're so grateful to you. To all the yes to birthers, thank you for being here. Thank you for making it to the end. And I hope you got some incredibly useful information and practical tools and a much better understanding of the direction that we are moving in is all of us who are so passionate about this work. So thank you for joining us, for being part of the Yes to Birth movement, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome. Bye. I am so happy that you're a part of the Yes to Birth movement. Please visit yestobirth.com to learn more about my pregnancy, birth, and beyond audio relaxation program, my childbirth education and techniques programs,
and my private counseling and coaching. Yes to birth. I'm Rachel Yellen. Bye.